I must also mention that people of Slavic origin are widely suppressed in this country as well. I believe that it goes back to the Cold War era and their unjustifiable hatred for Russians, but I also believe it's because many people in this country know that the Russians and other Nordic races are in many ways superior on a genetic level. The brutal winter conditions there have pretty much allowed only the strong to survive and reproduce. Many people have a predisposed disliking for President Putin. I see him as a great leader and know that he is one of the only people outspoken on the topic of the New World Order. Name me one other world superpower leader who actually acknowledges the New World Order and the irreversible outcome that it will bring. Do a search for Putin speaks about New World Order, and you will see how he really feels. Again, he is one of the only superpowers, the only superpower leader that I know of that has enough courage to stand against Zionism and their evil agenda. I'm not saying that it is a utopia there, or that I agree with him on everything. If you ever went there, you would see that they have a very beautiful culture, very interesting people. I've heard from credible sources and myself believe that it is doubtful that America would ever win in an all-out war with them in their 11 time zones, which makes me question the validity of the military-industrial complex. I believe that they're possibly playing a smoke and mirrors game with the American taxpayer. Russia also has China as their neighbor. I encourage you to look at the Moscow subway system and compare it to that of Washington, D.C. It is possibly the most beautiful in the world. Their cities have a great deal of engineering incorporated into them as well. In the 16 to 1700s, we were building structures of stone and brick. They were building exquisite architecture with golden domes. You would say we live in a third world country. Most people say, oh, they're a communist country. They were and are long out of that era. The people there love capitalism and freedom and don't want to go back to communistic values. They have a lot of room to grow, in my opinion, as well. They have a great geographic proximity to Europe, Asia, as well as other emerging markets, and a vast amount of natural resources. The United States peaked in approximately the 1990s and has been steadily heading towards Fabian socialistic values. Basically, 6 corporations control much of the world and this country, mainly big oil. Every 4 years, people in America go to the polls to elect their captors. It is one of, if not the biggest scams of all time. The whole Washington political arena is a shell game used for bipartisan divide and to divide and conquer our country from within. It makes me sick when I hear people say, I know what's going on, I watch Fox News. They line their pockets and help to sell the Iraq and Afghanistan wars to the naive American public. I don't know how these people sleep at night. All the controlled media have prepackaged stories that are designed to be fodder for the masses. On the other side of the coin, I heard an anchor from CNBC once vaguely say that people need to accept the fact that there will be 2 types of people: those who work and die, and those who will have life extension and better quality living conditions and will live for a long time. The Zionist-controlled media wants no religion, or a fallacious religion, and also to make Muslims look bad like jihadists. The truth is, the Muslim and Persian culture is one of the most beautiful in the world. In public schools and my post-secondary education, I was never taught about the beautiful architecture in Persian countries like Iran and Uzbekistan, or the mosques and other architecture in Russia. Again, no matter who they elect commander-in-chief, they are all shills for the Zio Global agenda. The major pushbacks are oil, banking, and biotech. They all lie to get elected. Take our current president, for example. He probably has a lot better idea than we do of what $1 trillion is, let alone 21 trillion, where our national debt currently stands. But he knows damn well he has no plan to begin paying back this insurmountable amount of money, not even in 2 terms. With great wealth comes the exceedingly good ability to hide it. By my estimation, many millionaires are probably actually billionaires, and many billionaires probably have more money than you could ever comprehend. Do you think that these people ever want you to encroach on their kids? In my opinion, a virtuoso leader would start a new industrial revolution based on suppressed energy ideas and bring back good-paying jobs to America. As well, he or she would stand up to the other countries and not allow them to dictate our political sphere through lobbies and special interests. Think about how this philosophy would benefit our environment and our globe. Companies like Tesla are not the answer. To name this company after this great mind is a disgrace, in my opinion. Nikola Tesla had ideas in the 1930s that were way ahead of what we are using today. They make stuff that only the wealthy can typically afford. Ultimately, the energy to charge the unnecessary batteries comes from the burning of fossil fuels. Plus, it's not like anyone's going to be able to work on one themselves. Their range is extremely limited. Imagine if we had vehicles with unlimited range. Think about how much freedom people would have and how it would bolster America's infrastructure from a microeconomic standpoint. They don't want people to be free from big oil. Someday I hope I'm able to pursue various energy ideas. I also don't believe that Nikola Tesla was a nihilist, like some people say. Regardless, it is 2018 and we're still burning oil and gas and destroying our earth with pipelines. A real leader would be a true pioneer. Solar is not the answer either. I have stuff I've came across that is far simpler than stuff not mentioned in books or anything else. Extremely simple, and I believe that this stuff would be great if you could bring it to light. Maybe someday I'll have the opportunity. Trump claims to be a steward for the middle class, but look at how he made a lot of his money. Off the backs of middle class people visiting his casinos looking to make quick money. He says he's against alcohol, but he was right there to have pretty cocktail waitresses giving free drinks to people. Ultimately, we have free will to choose right from wrong, but I believe the casinos intentionally manipulate people's neurological pathways with lights, sounds, alcohol, a woman, possibly O2 generators, and other psychological propaganda. I personally believe in forgiveness, but feel America deserves way better. I believe he sees himself as above everyone else also. He has major narcissistic tendencies, which in my opinion show insecurities he has from his youth. I believe he was preordained for this position years ago. It is so obvious that they used his TV show to bolster his publicity and to try to change his image with the charities and all. On a side note, I question the validity of almost every charity out there. I wouldn't even be surprised if game shows were completely fixed either. Additionally, Trump is surrounded, even in his own family and cabinet, by Zionist shills who continually support big oil, banking cartels, and the fallacious military-industrial complex. You never hear anything from his first wife. I bet he paid her off or threatened her to keep quiet. She probably knows a lot of dirt on him and where his offshore banking interests are. With respect to Trump, I know that there would never be a president elected that didn't have a wife and family. That is the main way the Illuminati holds collateral over people. If you don't obey, they will threaten you and your family. I don't want to just single out Trump. There are a lot of various issues that I agree with him on. A lot of these so-called Democrats and Republicans are responsible for diluting our American populace with porous borders and sanctuary cities. This makes it harder for true-blooded Americans to find good-paying jobs. It is also an attempt to try to override our Second Amendment. I don't have anything against Hispanics. Most of them have a great work ethic and a strong family structure. I know someone is putting them up to coming here, such as pizza shops, landscaping companies, painting companies, drywall companies, and other labor-intensive entities looking to exploit their cheap labor. If you took me down to the border, dropped me off with no food, no money, and transportation, where I couldn't speak the language, how the hell am I going to get to another state? Side note on pizza shops. It's to my knowledge that many of them get their ingredients from the same contrived entities. Question for you. Name me one other food that is as greasy as pizza besides French fries, which actually is cooked in grease. I don't believe that this much oil or grease belong in the body. Even after 8 years of Obama, the African Americans know that they are still pawns in the broader agenda. They would never get the piece of pie that they were led to believe under him. Sadly, in many instances, illegals get better treatment than do a lot of our veterans. My grandfather fought for the Union in the Civil War. My great-grandfather fought for the Union in the Civil War. My grandfather, as I previously stated, was in World War II. My dad in Vietnam. It makes me sick to see illegals get the same treatment, and in many cases better treatment, than true-blooded Americans. Many would argue that America had to allow these people to migrate here because of the massive disproportionate population imbalance between the baby boomers and that of Generation X and Generation Y. I don't buy this for a second, because I see how they allowed a whole generation to be killed through the heroin and opioid epidemic, abortions, as well as fallacious wars. I believe the heroin epidemic was worse than people realize, and that many people died, more people died than most people know about. If overall policies in the United States weren't so communistic, and there were still enough good-paying jobs, maybe it wouldn't disparage Americans from having kids. Years ago, a woman could be a stay-at-home mom and be the backbone of the family structure. Now it typically takes 2 incomes just to make ends meet and provide for your children. Once they overrun our voting populace, completely destroy our Constitution, they plan on continuing to dehumanize us through chemtrails, vaccines, water, food. Cancer rates have quantified in recent years, increasing the necessity and relevance of doctors as well as the biotech industry. These companies are in many cases pushers of placebo and poison. These contrived entities are unnecessary and fallacious. There is also a major suppression of science. across the board. In 2015, I had a major revelation in my life when I came across the International Association of Near-Death Studies, IANDS. I was profoundly impacted by their work, and it put things in perspective as to why I felt certain ways, having incurred numerous near-death experiences throughout my life. The earliest being when I was hit head-on by a tractor trailer when I was young. It fathoms my mind why they don't expose veterans or other near-death experiencers or even the general public to this profound work. Instead, they feed these people a cocktail of pharmacological poison that only quantifies their issues and diminishes their true gifts and potential. Many in the medical community write this off as a byproduct of an oxygen-deprived brain and not the miracle and gift from God that it actually is. If you search IANDS, symptoms of near-death experiencers, you will see what I mean. I was also very fortunate to correspond via email with Dr. Bruce Grayson, a former professor at the UVA in the study of applied physics and one of the world's leading researchers on near-death experiences. He has an amazing lecture out titled Consciousness Independent of the Brain. He talks about people who have little to no brain function but maintain 200 plus IQ levels and graduate from top-notch universities after sustaining massive trauma to the head and brain. The first time I listened to this, it brought tears to my eyes as it helped explain why I felt the way I did for so many years. If you ever had a near-death experience, I encourage you to check into these resources, especially the IANDS webpage, Symptoms of Near-Death Experiencers. For me, this information started a parabolic chain reaction of picking up pieces as well as a better understanding of my reptilian hybrid genetics. It ultimately challenged many of my preconceived Christian beliefs. Dr. Grayson's lasting words to me in our correspondence were, "You are blessed to see the materialistic trap that exists." I firmly believe that God has continually brought me back to this world for a special purpose. There's a great deal of interesting phenomenon that I have been able to hone in on with my subsequent understanding of this divine gift. If you want my opinion of who is to blame, the Zionists and the silver spoons. They control just about everything, and no one has the courage of speaking out against them for fear of their lives and their livelihood and life. I assure you that these Jews are not God's chosen. Andrew Breitbart, who actually was Jewish, spoke out against the silver spoons, also Washington, D.C. sex scandals and trafficking rings. He suspiciously died, although he appeared to be in good health. Many, including myself, believe he was killed. He was a great charismatic speaker and journalist. These evil Zionists want to keep everyone immersed with the illusion of freedom of choice. Please don't buy into their propagation of lies or the front they use with the military-industrial complex to support Israel. Russia is also a supporter of Israel and much closer to them than we are. Do you see them starting wars and conflict in the Islamic world? A major defining moment for me was when I visited the Kennedy gravesite in the Eternal Flame at Arlington National Cemetery. I used to align myself primarily with conservative views and hold a major disdain for Democrats. After reading the words of this great leader etched in stone, it became apparent to me that he would have been considered a Republican by today's standards, and also that the Democratic Party has deviated from courageous leadership and sound fundamentals. Please note that when I reference Zionist Jews, I'm not talking about Hasidic Jews, Messianic Jews, or even the good Jews living in Israel, or many of the descendants from the 12 tribes of Judah. The ones I'm referencing are the evil, satanic, idolatry, silver spoon Jews. These evil beings want the aforementioned people killed off, along with a lot of other people, and want no religion. They're the ones who run the entire financial system, and specifically the Federal Reserve and Treasury departments, as well as the cabal. These were probably the descendants of the Jews that killed Jesus. And when the second coming happens, they will probably do the same to him, or they would have to admit that they were wrong the first time. This time they won't make the mistake of letting him being martyred. Many people say we're supposed to protect the Jews. For every one time in the Bible, it says 10 times how God has come down and condemned them for betraying his word and his laws. So they have a perpetual history of pissing him off. The Zionists allow for greed, property, and a manifestation of lies to be transgressed through perpetual generations, continually kicking the can down the road. They want everyone besides themselves to be subservient slaves in manufactured dwelling complexes. They will eventually choke off the rest of the middle class through hyperinflation and the extreme cost associated with having kids. No one will be able to buy or sell any desirable real estate because it won't be for sale. It will be passed down to their progeny, as is the case already with desirable beachfront property, quality farmland, Manhattan real estate, etc. These people don't want anyone except themselves to have any significant money. Literally, if you walked out into your yard and found diamonds or rare gemstones, you would not be able to sell them. I'm not joking about this. They would probably find out your plans from the NSA, kill you off, and take your land before they would let you even try to do this. A friend of mine who is now deceased once told me about this, and that it happens near inactive volcanoes where diamonds are present. While on the topic of the NSA, please know that there's a lot more that I could go into on them about the revelations brought forward by a true patriot, Edward Snowden. It wasn't just a domestic spying program he blew the whistle on. He also talked about deep-level alien agendas within the core of our own government. I assure you that most of these Zionists do not shop at Walmart, eat GMO food, and give their kids vaccines, or use various other consumer products that slowly kill off and rob us of our true human potential and identity. These products make many people reliant on deceitful doctors and the fallacious pharmacology industry, which again are in most cases pushers of placebo and poison. Edgar Cayce, the godfather of holistic medicine and the sleeping prophet, was very outspoken against Zionists and prophesied about the evil they would bring to this world, and how Russia was actually a good force that would bring hope and truth against the Zionist cartels. This was part of his paralytic prophecies called World Affairs readings done over 80 years ago. I got this information off the edgarcayce.org website. There's a lot of other good resources about his other relevant prophecies. Sadly, in today's world, many homeopathic doctors are either killed, silenced, or discredited. A major moment in my health and wellness came when I stopped using consumer hygiene products, specifically deodorant. Not just antiperspirant deodorant with aluminum in it, but also supposed natural deodorants with no aluminum. These consumer products disrupt the body's lymphatic detoxification process, ultimately trapping in various toxins. When I discontinued use, I had a terrible smell that would emanate for a couple weeks. It then diminished somewhat after detoxifying. I typically practice good hygiene and wash vigorously, but a lot of soaps have harmful contaminants in them as well. I believe these products make people more docile, controllable, as a result of the estrogen mimickers, fragrances, and aluminum. It also is potentially bad for your respiratory system. This causes people to age and die prematurely, as well as getting dementia and Alzheimer's disease. It diminishes our level of consciousness and our regenerative abilities. Many people in Europe and other places around the world already know this. Toothpaste and water supplies contain sodium fluoride, which is a known neurotoxin. This is another example. They don't use calcium fluoride, which I believe is less harmful and a better choice for strengthening enamel. Ultimately, I choose not to use any shaving cream, laundry detergent, or toothpaste either. I was kind of iffy on not using the deodorant, to be honest with you. Most people I tell about this, they are very hesitant about it, but all I can tell you is give it a try for a couple weeks and you'll feel like a burning under your arms almost. You'll notice a major difference, and definitely I benefited from it, to say the least. Occasionally, I use it for instead of toothpaste, occasionally I use a bit of hydrogen peroxide, 3% to brush with. It works great for whitening your teeth. You're supposed to dilute it, but I don't. My ex-girlfriend taught me about this, and I must say I was nervous about doing it the first time. I do it maybe once a week, and it is absolutely great for whitening. While on the topic of health and wellness and hydrogen peroxide, I came across oxygen therapy using food-grade hydrogen peroxide. Not the topical use found in the stores, but food-grade 35%. There is a book out called 1 Minute Cures, The Secret to Healing Virtually All Diseases by Madison Cavanaugh. Another really, really good book. I read this cover to cover and was amazed at how controversial this is in the medical community. I started using this food-grade hydrogen peroxide therapy, oxygen therapy, before actually reading the book. Real quick side note on the book, it is extremely hard to get. I've been able to get many other deep-level conspiracy books at a major book retailer in the past, but this one they did not have available when I tried to order it in their stores. It claims that you can use it to treat virtually any disease or ailment. Given the vast amount of chemtrails and pollution in the air, I concluded that the air we breathe is probably much less pure than it was even 10 years ago, let alone when God created man and the earth had a pure aetheric environment. Our impure surroundings deprive our brain of what it needs to open up certain neurological pathways. I once attempted to get an oxygen tank filled, and they wouldn't let me do it without a doctor's prescription. Most likely they will not give you a prescription unless you are dying of emphysema, lung cancer, or some other type of rare disease. I tried finding other roundabout ways to get it filled, and the people I was calling were acting like I was trying to buy illicit drugs or something. The one person I started talking to said that it is extremely combustible and potentially dangerous for your health. This threw up major red flags for me. I said to this guy, "You mean to tell me that I can buy cigarettes, alcohol, take a number of other pharmacological poisons, and buy extremely combustible, unnecessary gas for my car, but I can't buy oxygen? Something is fishy." This was actually before I found out about the food-grade hydrogen peroxide therapy. I went to a natural food store and bought a bottle of 35% food-grade hydrogen peroxide and started with only 5 drops in a glass of water. You're supposed to use distilled water. The most I ever went up to was 13 to 16 drops. The book has a daily schedule that recommends up to 25 drops several times a day. I would advise that you start small and slowly work your way up to a level that you are comfortable with. I never use that much and would advise against overdoing it. This therapy costs only 1 to 2 cents per day. After taking 5 drops, I went out to run a mile and ended up running 3 without any shortness of breath. When I went to lie down, I felt calm and relaxed, almost as if I could stop respiration, like I was breathing through my blood. I went to sleep and had great vivid dreams. I woke up at 4 a.m. wide-eyed and ready to go. It was a completely natural feeling, unlike using any stimulants. I will warn you that it is extremely caustic, and that even a little bit on your fingers or hands will burn you. Definitely keep this far out of reach of children and pets. I recommend looking into it and possibly reading the book and other research before you go to purchase it and use it yourself. You can also get it on the internet. I would say consult your doctor, but ultimately I believe they would highly disparage its use. Again, I'm not a doctor trying to give medical advice. I'm simply connecting the dots. I believe that more oxygen also boosts your body's natural regenerative abilities. I don't currently have any underlying medical ailments that I know of, but I hear that this can cure cancer, AIDS, and Alzheimer's, as well as many other diseases. I actually totally believe this. I'm perplexed as to why this book is so hard to get. Probably because it would decimate a major portion of the biotech industry. The book elaborates on how the biotech and medical industries are a $2 to $3 trillion a year business, and that if this information made it to the light of day, it would decimate them, and also cause people to realize the self-evident truth that they have been lied to their whole lives, and that many people died prematurely and suffered needlessly from preventable diseases. If people knew the truth about the suppressed medical cures and how they intentionally make people sick, kill us off, and take our money, they would probably want doctors to be tried and hanged, particularly if they knew the truth about what vaccines do to kids. A pertinent quote from this book states, "The information in this book represents the biggest threat to the revenues of the pharmacological industry, bigger than all alternative healing therapies, nutritional supplements, natural foods, and products combined." Before reading this book, I came to an understanding that antioxidants may not be as good for you as conventional knowledge once taught us about ridding our bodies of harmful free radicals. This book explains that cancer thrives in anaerobic conditions or without the presence of oxygen. Cancer and other harmful bacteria can't survive and thrive in an oxygen-rich environment. The 1 Minute Cures book reaffirmed my thoughts on antioxidants. Another intriguing topic is trace minerals. I've heard that copper has been removed from many foods and subsequently causes our bodies to have iron toxicity. I started wearing a copper bracelet that I made and honestly feel a difference. The side note on chemtrails. I believe that there are at least 10 things that the globalists want to achieve with their use. They are used for pollution, population control, diminishing oxygen, sterilization, terraforming, geoengineering, evil demonic plots, destroying God's creation, robbing our bodies of vital vitamin D3, psychological warfare, neurologically compromising us, and a reason for the well-to-do to jet set around the globe. And oh yeah, hiding UFOs, etc., etc. Notice how we don't seem to have beautiful picturesque sunsets anymore, at least where I live on the East Coast. Someday, if I would like to purchase or rent high-quality scientific testing equipment to prove their existence, or other sources of pollution as well. I would also like to obtain other types of scientific testing equipment for various purposes. Vitamin D3 is also a very vital vitamin. Just like vitamin C, it helps boost our immune system. I take D3 and drink a whole squeezed lemon at least once a week. Some people maintain that the pure lemon juice hurts their stomach. I don't have time to go into every single medical revelation and suppressed medical science that I've come across so far. Most of the keys to health and wellness are self-evident, such as eating a well-balanced diet, not doing drugs or alcohol, smoking, drinking soda or taking a lot of caffeine, or living a sedentary lifestyle, as well as trying to eat organic non-GMO food whenever possible. And of course, drinking clean water not from plastic water bottles. I also don't eat a lot of carbs or red meat. All of this facetious conduct is being done by the global elites to degenerate us, kill us, so they can basically take our land. In my opinion, they're the ones that should be thinned out. I say this jokingly, of course. From a pathology perspective, it is obvious that this conduct is being done by the global control freaks that aim to degenerate us, take our money, and kill us off once they feel we are no longer a viable commodity and they have robbed us of our true existence and dignity. Also, from a pathology perspective, I believe that many diseases people die from are completely avoidable. They dehumanize us with Alzheimer's and various cancers, etc. They ultimately hide our true reptilian abilities. There are actually many medications, in my opinion, that do work, which are not allowed in this country. Europe and Russia, other places, they have them. I wonder why. The biotech industry in America probably did start with humble beginnings, with certain antibiotics and vaccines. I understand that this conduct is being done in the name of population control. I will expound on this later as I close. I believe ultimately in America certain sects of the Italian mafia have shifted from illicit drugs, alcohol, and gaming into this legal entity. Someday I will have to go into depth on other suppressed medical science, as well as healing with vibrational frequencies, electrical current, light therapy, etc. Another very good book about healing with vibrational frequencies, Eileen Day McCusick. Also very, very interesting. Tuning the human biofield, healing with vibrational sound therapy. I believe that humans could easily live 200 years, maybe more, if we weren't vaccinated and our food and water weren't poisoned, as well as an incorporation of good genetic gene pools. The Bible talks about people living hundreds of years as well. Typically, I find that the mind will go before the body. Some people seem to have a much higher level of consciousness than others do. Unfortunately, we are sheepishly herded to our old age when we could easily enjoy our young adult years much longer. As far as conspiracy theories go, control of the water supply is top of the mark. Please bear in mind that our bodies are 70% water. A friend of mine made me aware that the Chinese, big oil companies, and banks were buying up American water rights handed over fists. Nestle already has a major dominance and control over the consumer water market. This is alarming because of the number of people who buy their water from retail stores. Plastic water bottles are part of this kingpin conspiracy theory. Okay, so we're going to get back to my initial demonstration. I had to put this on a hot plate to kind of speed up the process a little bit. And it's kind of time-lapse, but you can see there is clearly an oily residue film that is left from the plastic water bottles. I've done this many, many times. I've also done this with spring water that comes straight from the ground unfiltered. And the alarming thing here that I find is that when you go to actually wash this off of the glass, it like almost etches to the glass. It like doesn't come off. And you can actually feel it with your fingers. I encourage you to do this yourself in your own home. I don't know if you have a spring or some type of well water. It doesn't go through treatment systems with salt and all that. But like I said, you can clearly see it. And I believe this is definitely a byproduct of the petrochemical based plastic and whatever else they are putting in it. I called Nestle Consumer Products their Consumer Products question hotline to ask them about this. I spoke with a woman named Mary on May 22nd, 2018. She claimed she'd never heard of this before and that Nestle does not add anything to the water. I told her how I first learned about this. Dr. Edward Group, who I've had the personal privilege of meeting at the March Against Monsanto event a few years ago, had a father who was a chemist that worked for ExxonMobil in Texas. He was a week or so from publishing a report linking cancer and the use of consumer plastic products. He mysteriously died before it could be published, and the company came to his house and took his work. I also told this woman to look into it for me, and if they ever do find anything out some kind of contamination, that they should have a disclaimer on their bottle. This would actually vindicate the company from future liability. I've never heard back from them. If this isn't population control, I don't know what is. Notice when you go to the store, glass bottles are essentially non-existent. I get terrible anxiety, like I said, just going to the grocery store and just seeing everything there. It's very obvious the agenda that exists at hand. I can't imagine what it must be like for older people with all the inorganic chemicals and all. Wealthy people have top quality water filtration systems from Switzerland, Belgium, Germany, and the UK and other places. The water in their swimming pools is actually probably better than most people's drinking water, and this is not a joke. Additionally, many of the baby blue colored pressure tanks in your basement, say right on them, contains a minimal amount of lead. Where I live, almost all bodies of water are labeled as impaired. This is all being done on purpose to essentially take over the whole entire water supply. This is scarier than you can imagine. There are various reasons for water pollution, such as inorganic agricultural practices, industrial pollution, residential runoff, poor engineering of land development projects, etc. I sincerely believe that in my area, most of the problem exists from inorganic farming practices and the use of high concentration nitrate fertilizers. Additionally, many of these farmers are also shills, as they receive subsidies for planting GMO crops and have their properties in agricultural zoning to avoid absorbent taxes. They directly benefit from a weakened US dollar, as it allows countries like China and others to come over here and buy up our grains. They ultimately pass their properties on to their kids or sell them for development. Their great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents oftentimes paid next to nothing to obtain these properties. As most people know, small farms have been disappearing and have been for several years. I assure you that I'm not a communist. The Bible talks about inheritance, but 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, people could probably find a piece of land and say, "This is mine, I want to farm it." It has been a dream and passion of mine to own an organic farm someday. But no matter what I do in my life, even if I save every penny and do everything right, working day and night, I would never be able to afford even a 50 to 100 acre farm and the machinery necessary to farm it unless I become a slave to the banks, let alone to be able to turn a profit. I see this as a major problem in the pursuit of the American dream. American farmers have benefited for many years from exporting their crops and ridiculous ethanol production. As they allow more porous borders and more housing, this will ultimately continue to destroy habitat and pollute our waterways. India, here we come. From an ecology standpoint, I can't emphasize how detrimental this is to various ecosystems and food chains. It is outright scary. The bees are disappearing at an alarming rate, which are essential for pollination of fruits and vegetables. When I was younger, I used to see flocks of blackbirds that covered the sky and stretched on for miles and miles. I used to sit out and look in amazement at nighttime at the lightning bugs which covered the sky. They have also greatly declined. I can't tell you when the last time I saw a grasshopper or a praying mantis was. When it would rain, you used to see earthworms crawl all over the driveway. Notice in cities you don't see pigeons, a lot of pigeons like you once did. Other bugs, birds, reptiles, and amphibians are completely gone as well. This makes me sad and uncertain about our future. The Bible talks about this in the end times. Again, the people behind this are the Chinese and the Satanists that are out to destroy the glory of God. It is truly a shame that future generations will not have the ability to enjoy the same glorification of nature that we had years ago. This really bothers me. All this stuff I'm talking about, I believe, is being perpetuated by the military-industrial complex being paid for with your tax dollars. Please note that I do not aim to degrade the Chinese. They have a beautiful culture that stretches back to the beginning of recorded history. Many of the other civilizations have come and gone in the span of time that they have been around. The 250 years or so that the United States has been here is essentially minuscule in the relevance of recorded time. Additionally, I do not aim to degrade Italians either. They also have a very beautiful culture. It is to my knowledge that a lot of various entities I talk about, specifically the Roman Catholic Church, have henchmen from the Italian Mafia that do their dirty work. I presume, just like any race, there are mixtures of both good and bad individuals. I presume that there are a lot of individuals with beachfront property who got it by screwing people out of it in shifty dealings. I would love to see their properties taken from most of them. A whistleblower named Ted Gunderson, who was head of the FBI field offices in Los Angeles, as well as other places, died or potentially was killed shortly after talking about chemtrails. This was before they were used to the extent that they are now. He once said, "Follow the money and look for the lies." The cabal run the military-industrial complex and make certain countries look bad. They demonize and seek to start wars with countries like Russia, Iran, and other Muslim nations, as well as places like North Korea, and so on. I recently spoke with a good friend of mine in St. Petersburg, Russia, and she acknowledged that the news media is making up what is going on in Syria. They want to bomb this little innocent country and destroy its historic sites and hide the truth from the public about real ancient history and anthropology. You would think that the military-industrial complex would not be able to get away with this after what they did in Iraq and Afghanistan. Per my earlier quote, pull up a 5 to 10 year chart for Lockheed Martin, symbol LMT, major military-industrial contractor. You will see that betting against them would be like betting against the Harlem Globetrotters. You can obtain this on Google if you search LMT, hit 5 to 10 years. It's really a joke in my opinion. I guess a justifiable reason for people to have jobs. I don't know. But anyways, again, this is all funded on the backs of hardworking American taxpayers, mind you. There are numerous other government contractors I could mention. This all goes to fund disgraced projects like the F-35 fighter jet, which is made with Chinese circuitry and is still inferior to what the Russians made years ago. Most definitely, the Chinese do have back doors incorporated into all of our war machines. I've heard this from credible sources as well. Ask yourself what they could have done with the $1 trillion they spent on this. Perhaps spend it on our country's crumbling infrastructure. China and Japan already have reverse magnetic maglev trains that can travel 375 miles an hour. They degrade countries like North Korea and make them look bad. Their capital city of Pyongyang actually appears to be nicer than many American cities, in my opinion. Do we still need fighter jets in 2018? Is this why God put us on this earth? Who will be their next boogeyman? Lockheed Martin runs these fancy commercials about fission reactors and all this other stuff that makes them look cool and scientific, like they have all the answers to life's problems. The military-industrial complex wants a two-class system and eventually